I'll kick us off and just say good morning to everyone. I'm Alexis. I'm a program manager at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. And today's event, this panel discussion, is part of our procurement readiness series, which we've developed with the generous support of one of our partners, Walmart, all to help veteran owned businesses successfully navigate this complex world and journey of corporate procurement. Over the last 4 weeks, we've hosted a series of virtual workshops on topics like supply chain management, creating a strong first impression with your brand, and we've even hosted a pitch readiness workshop. But beyond these live workshops over the last 4 weeks, we've also been collaborating with some very talented and smart humans, uh, business owners, corporate leaders, different business coaches, university professors, a good mix of people to build out a comprehensive resource library. The library, which will be hosted online on the IVMF website, is going to be packed with different videos, reading materials, worksheets, things like that, all aimed at guiding veteran entrepreneurs on their path to success in private sector procurement. So our mission with this is pretty clear. We want to see more veteran entrepreneurs successfully enter and thrive in this space. So today we have a panel that features three business owners who've experienced the various ups and downs that come with being a part of the supply chain for large private enterprises. They're going to be sharing their stories, challenges, tips for how they've navigated this space. So with that, let me just briefly introduce our panelists to you, and then, of course, they'll introduce as well. First up, though, we have Andrew Arbgast. Andrew is the founder and CEO of Arbo's Cheese Dip, based in Memphis, Tennessee. After a 10-year Army career and a stint in corporate sourcing at International Paper, Andrew launched his queso business. Somebody called you the chief of queso or the king of queso earlier this
Mandarin
morning,
cheese.
and I like that.
Yeah.
So Andrew now runs that business, working with multiple retailers across the Southwest, and is a 2023 Golden Ticket winner for Walmart's annual open call event. We also have James Lee III, who's the founder of J. Lee's Gourmet Barbecue Sauce, which is a 4-time world champion barbecue sauce. James began perfecting that recipe while on active duty and has since expanded that brand nationwide. We also have Elena Meyer. She's the owner and president of SC Datacom, which is a nationally recognized and integrated security systems company. So Elena oversees her company's rapid growth, which is now a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and works with clients both across the public and private sector. So welcome to our wonderful panelists, and thank you so much for volunteering your time today, and willingness to kind of share your insights and experiences with everyone.
Sure. Throw me into the hot seat first. So my first private sector client was a local hospital here. And that was a really big deal for us because that was the account that allowed us to move out of the spare bedroom in my house with a bunch of cameras on plastic shelves and into a real office that was like 600 square feet, but wasn't my home address. So that was very cool. And we got in there through relationships, which is part of the beauty and downside of the private sector, I think, as we've talked about previously. But in this instance, the security director had just retired. And one of my sales guys had a good relationship with the woman who took over that position. And she was kind of looking to bring in her own relationships to that program, and had a good relationship with him. And that allowed us to get a foot in the door. So relationships were very critical with that account.
I can't use the same one, Elena, but I would definitely double down on that. I think what pushed me into this direction was, not because of my sourcing experience in corporate, but just wanting to do something bigger than, leaving the service and going to corporate. It's like it worked for a little while, but over time it didn't. And my thought was, if someone else can come up with a recipe and figure out how to put it into a container and slap a barcode on it and sell it, then why can't I do that with my dad's cheese dip recipe? So I think about things very simply, and then I go for it, and then I learn all the lessons along the way. I'm not saying that's the best practice for everyone, but it was for me. And I think my theme was perfect is the enemy of good. And I struggled with, okay, I want people to take me seriously, right? And if I were to approach a grocery store, and my first private sector client was just this small independent grocery store here in Memphis that sold a lot of local products. So my thought was, well, I don't want this to look like, this came from the farmer's market. I want it to look professional so that people would take me seriously. But I spent a lot of time, I'm not going to say wasted time, but I perfected like this retail ready container. And I didn't push go because I didn't have a labeled like case, a master pack or whatever to put it in. I was using these Home Depot moving boxes, right? So I was like, I can't do this. This doesn't look legitimate. And someone was like, who cares? No one's buying the box that you're selling this in. And so eventually I was like, all right. So I just started selling it in these 24 case Home Depot moving boxes, and it worked, right? At the end of the day, something I was worried about was never even an issue. So I think trying to perfect something before you're ready to go may not always be the best case. In many cases, it's not.
Uh, all I can tell you is you just got to be laser focused, man, and you got to build relationship. It's all about relationship. It's not about what you know, it's who you know. That's the bottom line. That's the only way it's gonna work out.
I think we are who we are, right? And we can learn through experience and life and mature. But I think a lot of it stemmed from my experience in the military. And one of my first battalion commander, one of his leadership lessons was 360-degree leadership. And of course, we're like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, he's saying that, you know, in a room full of your superiors, you can't act one way and then turn around and treat people differently or act a different way, whether they're peers or subordinates. So it's about that mutual respect and relationship approach you take with as a buyer, as a sales rep. It's with everybody. And going to international paper in that corporate sector, my first boss taught me, if you want, as a buyer, he said, if you want a first class supplier, you need to be a first class buyer. And at first I was like, okay, well, does that mean just buy a bunch of stuff? No, it means be supportive of your suppliers when they are supportive of you, and operate in a not just a professional manner, but I have a very compromising negotiating or collaborative, let me say that. I have a collaborative negotiating tactic or approach just for my own personality. There are times where, I'm going to need, I'm throwing a Hail Mary. I need this part expedited or flown in. Well, what's going to encourage my supplier to do that if I have treated them poorly over the course of our relationship? And so it does come down to like, how do you treat people on both sides? And then I believe in karma, man. I truly believe like in helping someone out, you will get that in return. It may not be from that person, but it'll be through some other method. And so I've kind of just taken that approach my entire life since learning all these lessons in the military and corporate, and now as a small business owner. The one thing you have to know, though, it's and expect is transparency. I love transparency. I do my best to be transparent, probably to a fault. But when something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right, and it's okay to call it out. And if you just come to an impasse and you can't move on, well, then that's not a supplier you want to work with and going forward. So relationships can stay and grow and be strong, but there could be a time where you realize like I may have to burn this bridge.
We've worked with a lot of people in the past who are not respectful of the value that our organization brings, and in some cases are not respectful of the people that are working really hard in support of their mission. And we fired those customers. And of course, it's taken a point for the company to get to a point where you can afford to do that. I know everyone tells you that you should immediately fire everyone who's not a good fit, but the actuality is got to pay that light bill somehow. But we're able to fire people that are not a good fit now, and I'm very thankful for that because it's not worth it.
Because most of these guys that you go in and talk to in these retailers, I call some of them gatekeepers. They know you got a great product, but they don't want to let you in, you know, uh, because of their own little deals with different people on the side, you know, that they already established relationship. They don't want new relationships, some of them, but that's not all. But you just got to be yourself and, you know, be who you are and stick to your morals and your respect and ensure that you know, that, hey, you keeping your character intact, you know, and making sure you do the right thing at all times. So that, I mean, that's just what you got to do. No matter what deal you get, no matter what deal you're not going to get, you know, be you. Do not, you know, hey, don't sell your soul, be you.
Getting into large retail, that was my vision, is I'm going to get my dad's recipe made and scaled, and I'd love to be, you know, nationally present in every retail, every state one day. So that was the big goal that I had. And, you know, within 3 years, I'm halfway there. I'm in, you know, about 25 states and several big retailers. But then I start to realize like this is not what I thought it was. And you're giving everything that you're asked, right? So a retailer says, we need you to execute these promos on these dates and give us this much free product. And in hindsight, I should have really looked at the numbers, but I put more trust in their requests and just said, yes, I can do it. Well, then it got to a point where that relationship was abused, right? And what I mean by that is they don't want any they don't want any vacant space on their shelves. And so they're over ordering, or they mistakenly over forecast how much product they're going to need for a specific promo. And then I have a shelf life. So 120 days later, I find out that, you know, $75,000 in product is disposed of, and no one told me. But that's money they're not paying me, right? And so the obvious thing is like fight to get your money back, and I tried, but then I let this go on for 6 months because I just had this hope that maybe they'll do the right thing. Maybe they will compromise and give me some dollars to spend on promos, or they're going to make this right. They're going to make me whole somehow. And at the end of the day, they wouldn't. And so I got physically ill, mentally. Like this was a very tough thing because this was a dream to be in this retailer. And I remember it was a Friday about 2 months ago, and I sent that email, that Dear John letter, basically saying like, you know, I had much better expectations for, you know, doing business with you all. This is the predicament I'm in. And unfortunately, you know, I'm going to have to part ways. And they said, hey, thanks, best of luck. And I'm like, that's 75 grand. That's everything. I could go bankrupt, right? Like, and I had to figure out how to come up with this money. That's my livelihood. And so to see that response, it's again, it's like, it's not personal, it's business, but it's personal for you when you're the owner operator, and this is how you make ends meet. But to go along with that theme of like, hey, not everybody's on your team, not everybody's your friend. And even though this may be your biggest customer, if they're sinking your ship, you need to go. You need to let them go.
So I'm
You know,
hearing from your experience, I think, James, and also in what Andrew was saying too, is you can't expect, while you're forming relationships, you all made this point, right? You still can't expect these other businesses to always put your business first, right? That's your job. So yes, it may be a dream to get into these retailers or secure this, this contract, whatever it may be, even if it's not retail. But you still have to look out for number one, right? And mind your business, understand, if there's product sitting on the shelf, watching your margins to say, hey, where are our sales at? It's not just kind of a sit it and forget it situation when you get a contract or an agreement in place with one of these stores. Is that a good summation of what you all are saying here?
Yeah, you're only looking, I mean, you have to look out for your best interests, because assuming that you're taken care of is you have to ask the hard questions at the beginning. I think that's where it's like when you sit down and you receive a new award of business or you're giving an award of business, it's one of those things where you got to read the fine print and ask those questions. So what if this happens? And I wouldn't have known to ask that until it happened to me. But it's getting ahead of those things now. And if they say like, hey, that could happen, and if it does, you're responsible, well, then I think there has to be some mitigated risk where it's like, okay, well, I'm only going to sell you this much at a time, for you to sell through that. I'm not worried about your, vacant space on the shelf. Like you can manage some of that to a point, right? And you can say no. I think that's what we lose. We lose that confidence in ourselves as a small business to put our foot down or to ask for things that we're afraid we already know the answer to.
I think that's a great point. I think everything's always up for negotiation. A contract is really just a proposal of terms. It's not, the only field there is not your signature field. Now, of course, there are some people that are unreasonable and it's their way or the highway. That may or may not be we want to deal with them, make or break indicator. But for instance, payment terms. So we do quite a bit of business with the federal government, and we love doing work with the VA because they love doing work with service disabled veteran-owned companies. There's the Prompt Payment Act for veteran-owned organizations, which makes your payment terms net 15. And so that's my proposal for all customers, that they pay us net 15. I will accept net 30, but we get a lot of people that try to sneak in you get paid 30 days after we get paid, and that doesn't work for us. The scale of the job can kind of ebb and flow with the needs of the customer. And so I look at strategic value. It's not so much that, hey, I want my average deal size to be $50,000. So if this buyer isn't going to solicit at least $50,000 worth of services, then I'm not interested. They could meet that minimum purchase requirement, which is an internal soft requirement, by 25 different sales orders, in $2,000 increments. They could have a large upgrade at the end of next year that we only learn about by getting our foot in the door and establishing that trust with this first little job. So I'm looking at everything. Is it going to be a one-time instance where they're never going to call me again? They want to negotiate some crazy terms where they pay late and they pay the cheapest rate, and I know I'm never going to hear from them again. Or is this going to be a long-term relationship? And I think the best indicator that someone is looking for a relationship is what Andrew said. How do they treat their suppliers? Do they treat them as entities that are just there to be negotiated down to the penny? Or do they treat them as partners that offer a valuable service that they recognize that their organization needs and they're looking for quality? And if it's the latter, that's someone I want to work with.
If the cost to ship is going to severely impact your margins to the point where you're either going to break even or lose money, like, take a really close look at that and look at every possible scenario and variable and weigh that with what the price is that you're going to give them the product. And if you are saying, look, I can do this, I don't know if we're going to reach the SRP that you desire, the retail price that you desire on the shelf, but I can sell it to you for this. If you order this much more, I can sell it to you for that, rather than just kind of pigeonholing yourself into a spot where it's like, hey, this is it, I can do it. And then, 3 months, 6 months later, you realize like, I wasn't ready for this. And so I think it comes down to like, your margins, but also how you're sourcing everything that comes into your margins, your freight, your services, all of your overhead. And it's a constant validation of where your margin is versus how much it's fluctuated, and can you sustain the business in a long term. We don't want to. No one wants to just uh, reach an agreement on an order, and then it's not something that's going to be a long term. That's not my practice. My goal is to get in and stay in. And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons learned for me. And then the other one is, the contracts, right? Like Elena said, that we have to start somewhere, and they're sending over their proposal. They hope you sign it, but you have to look at it and have those conversations where it's like, hey, look, I have net 30 terms with my manufacturer, and I would really prefer to have at least net 30 with you, so that my cash flow is aligned. And you'd be surprised so many times. It's like, yes, but they'll put some low hanging fruit in there because they don't want you to ask for the larger things. It's just protecting yourself in the long run. Sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error. And I would say the biggest retailer in the world that I have the opportunity to do business with is my best supplier. They're the most transparent. They put me on a pedestal. They support me being a veteran owned business. And it would seem unlikely that that would be my experience, but it has been nothing but great outcomes. And then it's sometimes the ones that you expect are going to, be that good, that strong supplier, strong customer, or whatever, turn out not to be the case. So I'm such a proponent now of knowing who I'm doing business with, and then seeing the red flags early on.
One of the things that has been really critical for us is communication skills. I think that's just such a fundamental of any good relationship, and supplier customer relations are no exception to that. We're not just asking for, I want to move up from the bottom shelf to the third shelf. You're asking this major corporation with X stated amount of supporting veteran business goals to help you, a veteran-owned business, achieve your goals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been really critical. The other thing, and I don't really have a silver bullet for this, but leverage. So with our suppliers, we have one of our top suppliers right out of the chute offered us 90-day terms, and that's huge. It's very helpful to our business, obviously very helpful to our cash flow, but is also a very nice piece of leverage that we've used to get a minimum of 90-day terms with all of our suppliers, because we now have it in hand. And if you want to keep our business, you've got to rise to the occasion and meet the bare minimum expectation, which is now 90 days. So how that took us, many years in business to achieve, but now that we have it, it's being open with our supplier partners. When they ask me the same question I ask my customers, how do I earn more of your business? I'm very upfront. Terms, that's what I want. And they can meet it, and that's great. And I find that many of them do, or they're not getting our business, because that's what's most important to me. But I also think that feedback is really important. So we have in my industry, manufacturers build the product. They don't sell to the end user. People like me are the middleman, where we put all of the pieces together and install them. So it's a funny little triangle that does this, but our distributors often have access to the same lines at varying price differences that kind of fluctuate on a regular basis. And I'll go back and tell my big three, hey, you quoted me this project, and your price was 5% higher. I want to make them aware of that so that they have the opportunity to sharpen their pencil and earn my business, but also so I'm not wasting my time or theirs on the next one. Because I'm not satisfying an internal requirement for 3 quotes. I am earnestly looking for the best deal. Price isn't everything, but it is important.
I think with getting to that best outcome is going to require some give and take, obviously, on the negotiating side. But every customer I've dealt with has been different, and it could be, what is your delivered cost? And they're just asking you, like, how much is it going to cost us? And I always want to give them options. I can say, well, I have a tiered approach. Based on your location, I need to ship at least a minimum of 3 pallets. And that would be at this cost. Well, at 6 pallets, it'd be less, at 9, and so on. Or if you don't want to work around minimums, you can buy it through our third-party distributor, where their minimum order quantity is 1 case. The cost is higher, but I want to give them as many options as possible. Well, if they come back and say, well, we really need this to be at a $5.99 retail or a $6.99 retail, but we need a 50% markup, they need a margin of 50%. Then they're kind of putting that back on you to lower your cost, right? Well, you can say, hey, I don't, in order for me to do that, I can't pay slotting fees. I'm not able to run any promos. So you kind of just figure out where's that sweet spot. And in most cases, sometimes this is my technique, but I'll get to the point where I'm showing them, this is my cost. And these are the 3 freight quotes that I have for shipping my product from here to New England. And I just want to show you, so you don't think I'm like padding this. So I think some transparency maybe helps some cases. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's got to work for both parties, right? And it's okay to not reach an agreement, because you probably just saved yourself and them as well a lot of heartache in the long run. But if there's ways for you to show them value in order to get that price, that delivered price of whatever it is, it's just the more you can do, that's not going to compromise your cost or your profit and everything else. I think there's sometimes you'll just have those conversations, and you'll know that they don't really want the product based on the stance that they take in their negotiating. And that's the way this works, but it's best to avoid that. I think one other one as well is, looking at economies of scale, right? So the more I buy and ingredients and raw materials, in theory, the less cost, I receive better pricing. And so if I'm able to go back to my supplier and say, I know I'm buying this for this amount today. However, we've got 4,000 stores that want this product, but they need it at this price. Can we agree on, because we're getting you, this much, 100% volume increase from where we are today? Can we look at a lower cost from you for me to resell it? So, I mean, there's a lot of creative ways you can use to reach that agreed to price.
The whole thing is like being able to negotiate. Don't never come to the table with your drop bottom price. Don't never come to the table like that. Always have a little wiggle room, to negotiate, to get, to try to get your product inside with that retailer, and a lot of things we would do is like demos, different things like that, to help push the product. But that's one of the biggest things. You got to always have room for negotiation, great communication and negotiation. If you can't reach a deal, don't try to make yourself reach some that you can't, because just like Andrew's saying, I mean, you will get stuck. You will get screwed with shipping for sure, because shipping, it changes every single day. You may
Mhm.
get a quote today for $200 for that spot, and tomorrow it's $700. So you have to just try to figure out, you know, what to do in order to keep, in order that you make profit and you give everybody a quality product.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree with you that you should always come to the table, ready to negotiate, and that your first offer shouldn't be your best offer. That's been challenging for me personally because it's not how I operate. I operate from as you said earlier, also bottom line up front. Here's my best deal. Here's my fairest deal. Let's move on. But there are customers that need to feel like they're winning.
Right.
So they want to negotiate something. So I've learned to keep something in there for those difficult cases that will not let me leave until they've, won the arm wrestling match. And that's challenging.
And that you're right. And that's the whole key, that they want to feel that they are winning.
Yeah.
Period. You know what I'm saying? They are
Mhm.
winning. That's what they care about.
Yep.
Yeah, you need to know your product. I mean, you need to know your product. You need to be confident in what you are selling. You need to know exactly what makes your product different from everybody else's. You got to prepare yourself from the beginning, before when you getting ready to get your SRP right, or whatever you're gonna wholesale this product for. You got to figure all of that in. Like Andrew saying, you got to go to the drawing board and make sure that, hey, okay, this costing me this, shipping gonna cost me that, the finished product is gonna cost me this, and you got to know all of those things. Like, you got to set a minimum. Hey, look, if you get this from me, I will, because they're gonna ask you what's your minimum. Okay, so you could say I got a pallet minimum or 50 case minimum, but you got to have a minimum.
Yeah,
And
to your point, checkers versus chess, I have found in my business, and again, a little different because services provider versus a manufacturer than you guys, but my ultimate checkmate, to still stick with your analogy, is autonomy. I think that's such a weapon as a small business, that you can really differentiate yourself with. If you're having that conversation with someone and you know your numbers, you can arrive at a solution right there rather than having to go back and think about it and get 18 different pieces of paper, signed off on, which ultimately what you're doing is giving them a dozen different opportunities to say no or come back at
Exactly.
you. If you know your numbers and you can stay agile, you can stay in the driver's seat. So what's the problem? How do we solve it? How low am I willing to go? Let's do it right now.
people love doing business with the owner. And
Mhm.
like no one,
Yes.
we don't have to get anything vetted or approved. It's quick, right? And
Yep.
and so doesn't mean you have to give them a yes or no on the spot. You can say, let me scrub these numbers real quick. I should have something back to you by tomorrow on the different options that we can provide. But I do feel like one of these will be a perfect outcome, and it's just a matter of adjusting from there. So
So we had an instance of this just this month where we were given an opportunity to provide a quote for the security in a local prison. Project manager called us and was like, "This is a crazy number. I was looking for 300." I'm like, "Okay, well, our number was 450 and your number is 300. So that tells me that we are missing something, that we either quoted like a whole different system or something's missing from your quote. Could you share it with me? Can I just see, apples to apples here?" And it turns out that the other provider hadn't quoted the access control. Like it was complete. We did a full key solution. The other provider had just missed an entire system. And that was the reason for the price discrepancy. So we are still in negotiations there, but again, asking for questions, and I would qualify this person as a good partner, whether or not we get the work, that they were able to be transparent with us and give us the information, and not just say your price is too high, your price is too high, because when there's that significant of a price discrepancy, it means there's something wrong.